Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be talking about a story asking the question why activism from the Black community has gone down throughout the course of these last few years. And actually, have they gone down? Then again, it's hard to come back from a time where they were as active as they were in 2020 and 2021. But what is going on? Is there apathy in the community? These are the questions that Axios, the article we're reading from today, is actually dealing with. And of course, we'll end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. What is the biggest protest movement that you've seen throughout your life? Throw down their comment sections. Have any of the recent ones been reminiscent of those ones? Because I'm sure my audience, I know for a fact my audience spans multiple years. And what I mean by that is some people that are older and would probably say the Vietnam War protests, and some people that are my generation that would say maybe Occupy. That would probably be more like your Gen Xers, Gen Zers. Sorry, your millennials, and then your Gen Zers, your Gen Yers, whatever the ones after Gen Z are. Gen A, I don't honestly know. Gen Alpha, whatever they're called. Those would probably be the riots of 2020, the protests of 2020, of 2021, and maybe even the Palestine or Hamas protests that are going on nowadays. So, with that said, throw it down in the comment section. Let's actually jump into the first staging paragraph of the article that gives a little bit of insight, but allows for more questions to be raised that we'll definitely jump into. Quote, nearly 5 years after the fueling of the largest protest movement in American history, Black activism stands at a generational, emotional, and strategic crossroads. Why it matters. Many of the Black Americans who flooded the streets in 2020 have stepped back from the new renewed anti-Trump protest, torn between the urgency of the moment and the spiritual toil of relentlessness, often fruitless in the resistance, end quote. Why has this movement been crippled? They may have felt as though for 2019, 2020, they were extremely important, which they were, in creating a sense of unsafe, creating a sense, and what I mean by that is that when you have people out there protesting, and protests in multiple places that turn to riots or completely autonomous zones, when you have that as a constant narrative, you see it year after year, because basically the protests went on for at least 6 months, and they do span over a long period of time, and you saw protests even after that. When that is something that characterizes somebody's presidency, then people, especially when it's recent, with recency bias, they tend to say this is something that is attributed or at least happened under Donald Trump, and we want to try to get away from this. Whether it was the Black community going out and claiming that Donald Trump is a racist and using those sort of claims to justify their actions, whether it be systemic oppression, whether it just be the fact that people were going out and protesting at all for anything, any American during the Trump era, that is going to end up hurting him. So it feels as though that those protests had a huge impact. And when Joe Biden gets into office, you could very well say there is a correlation there between the protests of people who said the system is unfair, Biden who's trying to tap into that, and also people who don't want to vote for Trump because the protests made it feel like it was an unstable time. So they could walk away. Anybody who was protesting there, and they were really organizing movements, they could walk away from that moment and say, we had a actual effect. We were not just out there screaming and yelling, but we built something that had momentum and actually affected the future of the nation. And now the person that they didn't very much like, or at least they were actively playing a role in trying to make sure it doesn't get back to the presidency, whether it be his economic agenda, whether it be, like I said earlier, if they believe that he's racist, whether or not it be the fact that they actually think that the Democrats are more progressive, or maybe it's just that they don't trust the government, but whatever it may be, they were able to get out there and influence change. And now that he's back, now that after all of that, when they said they didn't want him in there, and I'm not saying all African-American activists, all Black activists are that way. That's not even close to true. That would be overly generalizing about them. But we can definitely not disagree on the fact that they had an actual effect, and more often than not, Biden was trying to directly speak to their issues, even though they didn't always feel as though he was the best person to actually stand up for their issues, which is fair enough. There was lots of hesitancy from black activists and people who were concerned about DEI issues with a person like Joe Biden being on the ticket because they felt as though he harkened back to a time of the older Democratic era. But after he loses, and even the worst option, which was Donald Trump in that first term that they were actively protesting, comes back, it would be a moment where you have to genuinely ask the question whether or not your movement was effective. It may have been effective in the moment, but was it effective long term? Did it keep this man out of the office, or did it just change the circumstances temporarily? And also, on the left, there's only so much bandwidth that anybody can have for certain issues. And guess what? Even though Biden was trying to address some of these race issues and they got some of the air in the room after October 7th, after Israel's retaliation, it gave a perfect example to the people who had never seen this conflict play out in the way that it had before. And also for pro-Palestine and pro-Hamas protesters, advocates in the United States, it provided another example of this happening that we can't ignore is probably the simplest way to put it, because very often we're shielded from the Israeli operations that happen within Palestine, and we're also shielded from the terrorist attack that happened inside Israel, or whether it be the bombings or anything like that. We very often don't see that. It doesn't break through our cocoon. October 7th and the response to October 7th broke through the cocoon, and the air in the room for activism got sucked up into something that is more visceral and can more hit the people right where it hurts. That is why the protests that turned into riots were a great effect, because it showed they were able to justify it on some level because it showed the rage of the people. Now there is something else that they can transfer that rage to generally in the Democratic Party, not saying any one activist that cares particularly about an issue, but also they have a visceral example that they can take along with it in order to properly advocate. So there's only so much room in a movement for those sort of protests. Obviously, there can be alignment between them, and there is. There are alignment between gay rights activists and the people who support the Palestinian lives, and then also between people who fight for DEI issues or simply for empowering black communities or making sure that government policies are no longer systematically trying to hurt those people. All of those perspectives are on the left, and all of those perspectives can coexist in multiple people. But to pretend as though they can be the center point of any given argument, it's not, oh, we want gay rights and we want to support Hamas. It is queers for Palestine. Palestine is being the central issue at this point. It's African Americans for Palestine. It's women for Palestine. All of these things, these different coalitions, these groups can obviously advocate for their own thing and for their given populations within that place in Palestine. But it is always in Palestine. The focus is Palestine. And that has taken up so much air that black activists have to really ask the question, is this the moment? What are we going to be able to do in the future? So I'm going to actually read a middle part here. Quote, most participants that were older and white and were seen at rallies across the country, confirmed by Axios, a stark contrast to multiracial black-red protests led in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And this is driving the news section. Quote, photos from last weekend's hands-off demonstration where millions of people protested DOJ cuts, immigration raids, and mass federal layoffs show a striking shift from 2020. Quote, campus protests over Trump's immigration crackdown have drawn primarily white, Latino, and Asian American students, with black participants largely absent from the front lines. And one more here, quote, in Washington, D.C., Black Lives Matter Plaza near the White House was quietly dismantled last month after funding threats from Republicans, a symbolic setback in what once was an epicenter of the 2020s racial reckoning, end quote. So you can see the momentum is no longer on their side. They are not able to get out there and actively say that they feel as though they can have a material benefit. And that's not to say they can't, but there's setback after setback. There's oxygen being drained from the room, and their previous major victory, if you want to properly ascribe it to them, which obviously there is more to it than that. It's not just black activists that went out there and fought for these issues and tried to get Trump gone, but they were part of the coalition that was able to at least put pressure on the American people on a symbolic level and get Trump out. And that is overturned at this point because Trump has been able to come back in. when all of those things are what you're advocating for, what you have to deal with, it does ask, and also there's the current state of the Democratic Party and the liberal nonprofit sphere and NGO sphere, non-government organization sphere, because there's only so much funding that you can provide to anything. You are going to have to ask the question, is this a moment where we can actually be most effective? Is this what we want? Are we doing what we need to do on the ground? Do we have to change our approach? And that leads to a moment of reckoning. So we'll see how this changes in the future. While I was not a fan of the protests that turned into riots, I am a fan of protests in general from anybody, because your opinion is always important. It provides a mechanism to actually get your message out to the normal American, but also it provides an opportunity for the normal American to actually get involved, because a educated American, an American who is actively participating in our system, even if I don't agree with them on politics, I have more respect, and I think that is a better citizen than someone who haphazardly sits on the side and doesn't do any research and doesn't care about our system at all, and isn't actively fighting for the values that they believe will help our system be propagated, will allow it to be around for our children, and benefit them in the same way that it has benefited us by allowing us to live in the greatest, richest nation on the earth. So, with all that said, let's jump into our daily delight. Like I said, this is meant to leave you feeling positive. This one comes from Dog Time, and the headline reads, "Video captures dog's surprising move after owner catches him stealing food." And honestly, yeah. I mean, if you ever caught your dog stealing food, you know exactly what this video is going to look like. But this little guy, he got it. Never mind. You know what? I say it all the time. You can go watch the video yourself. The link will be in the description below. That like and subscribe button, it'll leave a little smile on your face. You can share it with some of your friends. So, with all that said, I hope this found you well. If you want to find the podcast, you can go to the link in the description for on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post the links to that Twitter account, or X account, however you want to say it, for the episodes that come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday over here. Or if you want to come over to our 6 and 6, that's 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. It's international news. Go down there. You can also find the links posted there on every Tuesday and Thursday. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.